Hi everyone, and welcome to a quick overview of Lesson 8.2, Graphing Polar Functions. So let's take a look at the easiest ones to graph. We have r equals 3, and that's going to be a circle because this is giving a radius value. So basically I go to all the points with a radius of 3, so 1, 2, 3, and I'm just going to draw a circle here because these are all of the radius values of 3. And theta can be any value I want. So it's just going to graph as a circle here on my polar graphing paper. So it's going to graph just as a circle. Now the other one that is relatively easy to graph is this theta equals pi over 3. Basically that's going to graph as a line because notice they haven't given us any r values. So basically I'm graphing all of them. So all I do for the positive r values, I'm going to graph in this direction, all of those r values on pi over 3. Okay, and then for the negative r values, I would go to the other side of the pi over 3 line, and there would be all of my negative r values. So those are the two easiest types to graph, when they just give you r equals or they just give you theta equals. Okay, the next step harder is where they give you an equation and you decide to make a table of values. So what I've done is I've actually created the table of values ahead of time because it can be rather time consuming. And that's why I would say it's kind of medium in hardness. It takes a long time, but it is relatively easy to graph after that. So I'm going to show you how to get those values. I just used my calculator for it. So all I did was I typed in 1 plus 2 cosine of whatever angle I wanted, and I'll use 4 pi over 3. Okay, and I just hit enter. Okay, and I get 0 for that. So I'm going to add that onto my table, and you just keep doing this over and over and over and over again. And eventually you will get enough points that you make your graph. Now one thing to be careful of is you want to do a full period for whatever this is. So you want to make sure to double check the period, make sure it's still 2 pi, and you want to do that entire period. Okay, so 4 pi over 3 would be right here. Okay. Another thing to be careful about is to actually do those in order. You want to make sure you're going in order around your unit circle. You don't want to go out of order. Okay, so let's just take these and put them on our graph now. So I have 0, 3, so 0, 1, 2, 3. I have pi over 4 and 2.4, so that's about there. And I'll connect those with a curve. And you always want to be careful to connect in order. So I always connect as I go. Pi over 2, 1, 3 pi over 4, but this is negative 0.4. So I go to the other side of this line, negative 0.4 would be right about here. Okay, so it obviously crossed 0 in here, which I can tell because if I wanted to, I could put in one of the pi over 3s and it'll probably get me a 0. So I know it's going through 0. Pi is negative 1. And the more points you get, the more accurate this is going to be. I usually like to do at least every other value around the unit circle. So I start with 0, and then I do pi over 4, pi over 2. These are the ones I usually pick. However, as you can see, my pi over 4 has got me decimal values, but it looks like pi over 3 might have been a better one to pick. So it's up to you how you want to pick those. We were right here. 4 pi over 3 is 0, so that would be right there. 3 pi over 2 is 1. It's going to curve out like that. 7 pi over 4 is 2.4, right about there. And then it's going to go back to 3. So that's my graph. Okay. So we have one more type of graphing to look at, and that's where we take a rectangular graph and we change it into a polar graph. So let's review how to graph a rectangular graph. You may recall from chapter 5 But I gave you this formula to kind of help you remember what each number does. A stands for amplitude. And that describes how tall your graph is, how far it goes from this x-axis. And that's the thing that you would want to change first before doing anything else. P stands for period. So if there's a number here, you take the function's period, which is usually 2 pi or just pi for tangent, and you want to divide by this number. And S is the phase shift. That's going to be a horizontal translation. So that's going to move your graph left or right. Okay, so let's take a look at how to graph this one. So this has an amplitude change of 2, and it's gone up by 2. This is a vertical translation up 2. Okay, so cosine normally would start at 0, 1, but I have to double that, and then I have to move it up 1, 2. So it's up there. At pi over 4, I would get square root 2 over 2. I have to double it, square root 2. And then that would be normally right here, but I have to take that and move it up 1, 2 to be right about here. Pi over 2 is 0, so I have to double 0, which is just 0, and then move it up 2. And I'm just going to continue this pattern. So it would be here and then here. And I just continue that pattern going around my unit circle and putting in points. And you'll notice after a while that your values are going to repeat themselves, so you can just kind of go off your previous patterns. So that is my rectangular graph. Now let's work on transferring that into a polar graph. All I'm going to do is use the points that are now on my graph. And it gives me a little more information about how fast it is approaching a value. So like at 0, 4, that's my first point. 1, 2, 3, 4. I'm going to put a point. Okay, my next point is going to be at pi over 4. Actually, I'm going to mark these in between points before I go any further so I don't make a mistake. This is 5 pi over 4 and 7 pi over 4. Okay, so at pi over 4, I had 1, 2, 3, and a little. So I'm going to graph out at 1, 2, 3, and a little, like that. And notice it has a pretty general curve through there, so I'm just going to go pretty consistently. Then it changes a lot down to pi over 2. Pi over 2 is at 2. So 1, 2. So it's going to be a pretty steep curve right there. Okay, at 3 pi over 4, it's a little more than 1. Sorry, a little more than 0. So 3 pi over 4, right about here. Okay, curving in. At pi, it's at 0. 5 pi over 4 is going to be a little more than 0 again, like that. 3 pi over 2 is going to be at 2. So 3 pi over 2 is at 2. Okay. 7 pi over 4 is going to be 1, 2, 3, and a little. So right here is 1, 2, 3, and a little. And then we're back to our value at 0. It's going to be about like that. Okay.